Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do.
Thank you, everybody, for dialing in. We'll go ahead and get started. I've read through the questions that everybody submitted. Thanks for posing those. We want this to be as engaging of a discussion as possible. So if you have other questions that pop up, feel free to shoot them to Shekhar. Feel free to post them in the chat, whatever is easiest for you. Want this to be engaging. In going through it, I thought maybe just to set the tone, I would kick it off by going through one example of how I went about building a relationship and how it's been impactful throughout my career and through my life. And then I'll also talk about one of the questions that I get very often and that also popped up in the Q&A, but it was around the difference between relationship building and networking. So I thought I would begin just by covering a little bit of that to set the tone. And then, Shekhar, I'll turn it over to you in order to walk us through the conversation. When I think about mentorship guidance that I've received throughout my career, definitely the most impactful person has been Carla Harris. If I think about the early stages of my career and so forth. So to give context for those who don't know her, she's been at Morgan Stanley for over 30 years. In addition to a banker, she's also a gospel singer, and she's had 5 sold-out concerts at Carnegie Hall, which is the photo and above Pope Francis. And then she also performed at Madison Square Garden a few years back when Pope Francis was visiting New York. So a really accomplished not only banker, but also singer. She was chair of one of President Obama's national councils, on the board of directors of Walmart, on the board of directors of Harvard, and on the board of directors of this organization called Sponsor for Educational Opportunity, which I'm an alum of. So she's somebody that has just had a tremendous impact. And so what I wanted to do is walk through kind of how I thought about actually building this relationship and how it evolved over time. So the first time that I met Carla was actually October of 2010. For context, I had participated in a national essay competition that was hosted by an organization called the Executive Leadership Council, which is for African American CEOs and or people who report into the CEO, as well as people who run a $1 billion plus P&L. And so I ended up going to New York for a gala that was hosted by the organization, and Carla was the keynote speaker. And this was the first time that I heard her speak. It was really inspiring, impactful. In particular, what resonated with me is it felt like she was able to achieve these high levels of success while also remaining extremely authentic to who she was as a person. It didn't feel like, to me, there was a difference between, Carla in the workplace versus Carla as she might want to be around her kind of family and friends. And as a college student, I always felt like I had to almost be a different person when I showed up in the workplace. So she had this aura about her that really resonated with me. So I remember vividly giving a keynote on the stage. I went up, I stood next to the stairs when the keynote was done. So knowing that she would kind of pass by that way. And I just jumped into my 30-second pitch. At the time, I had just finished up an internship with Goldman. I had an offer to return, and I jumped into my pitch, which was, "Hey, Carla, I'm a junior at Penn. I had an internship with Goldman and an offer to return this past summer. I think Morgan Stanley might be a great cultural fit. I have a lot of mentors that are there. If I end up interning there this summer, can we sit down and have a conversation?" And Carla, being the warm person that she was, she absolutely was like, "Yes, let me know when you end up at Morgan Stanley. Good luck with the recruiting process." So fast forward, I ended up getting the internship with Morgan Stanley August of 2011. I actually sat down and had that conversation with Carla. And it was a really impactful conversation. At that point in my life, I was deciding, do I want to actually go and do something like Teach for America, or do I want to do something like Wall Street? And these two things sound very different. But when I was a college student, that was kind of the dilemma that I was grappling with. And, Carla really helped me think through that and helped me realize that your title doesn't necessarily need to define the impact that you want to have, which gave me comfort in ultimately starting my career out at Morgan Stanley, which I think was the right place for me. And then, in my early years at Morgan Stanley, I made it a point to meet with Carla a handful of times per year, just checking in with her, getting her guidance before big decisions and so forth. By 2014, I had established a relationship with her. She noticed that I was somebody who would reach out proactively. Every time I reached out, I would bring my A game. And when she gave me advice, I would really follow through on that advice. So she had come to realize that by this point. And 2014, Morgan Stanley was launching a new team called the Multicultural Client Strategies Group, which was focused on increasing business with Asian, Black, and Hispanic clients. And so when I found out about this opportunity, of course, applied for it, ended up getting accepted for this position and reported directly to Carla for about 2 or 3 years, which was some of the best learnings that I got just in terms of leadership and also just seeing how she views the world and how she processes, which is extremely impressive to be able to see up close. She ultimately wrote my business school letter of recommendation. Before getting my MBA at HBS, I ended up working for an education company in China. Education, you'll see, is kind of a core theme. I'm really passionate about education, a big part of why I try to weave these experiences in. But I ended up working for an education company in China based in Chengdu, actually a school which had developed a professional development curriculum around a book that Carla had wrote. First book was Expect to Win, second book was Strategize to Win. The school had created a professional development curriculum, and one of the exercises was they all had to basically read the book and then draft a letter to Carla, just updating them or asking Carla for some advice. They could really do whatever they wanted. And then the idea was there's about 20, 30 students in the class. The idea was that Carla would select, or the professor would select the best email, send it to Carla, and then Carla would actually write a response to the email. So that was the idea. Carla being Carla, which she's a very thoughtful person. She, actually responded to all 30 of the messages. The students got really excited, and then the professor decided to bring the students from Chengdu to New York for a visit, not just to meet Carla, but if you're going to go 10,000 miles, you make a bigger trip out of it. So they visited a bunch of companies and so forth, Morgan Stanley being one of them. The day they were supposed to meet Carla or hear Carla speak, she was stuck in traffic across town. So I got a phone call from her a few minutes before it started saying I needed to stall for 20 or 30 minutes. So I just kind of jumped into actually a conversation largely around how I went about building relationships in a professional context. Carla came in, gave a super inspirational speech. All was well on that front. Then that led to the director of the program asking me to come to China and work with them on this, work with them for a summer. Which is what I ended up doing. So this is an opportunity that I was able to do. And again, this is something that I share this as an example because it's really an opportunity that came out of this relationship with Carla. She ended up being the class day. So basically class day is what we call our graduation. So she ended up being our graduation speaker I graduated from HBS in May of 2019. She was the graduation speaker in May of 2018. But that was a good, excuse or opportunity for me to check in with her and so forth. And then May of 2019 was my graduation and had the opportunity to kind of check in with her around that time as well. She comes every year because she's on the board of directors for Harvard and so forth. So I just wanted to kind of lay the foundation. And I also wanted to say that building relationships in my mind is something that takes time. So I wanted to kind of actually map that out very explicitly because a lot of times I'll have people reach out to me and they'll say something along the lines of, hey, I'm planning on applying for an internship at this company this summer and I really want to build strong relationships. What advice do you have? If you're reaching out to people 2 or 3 weeks before you're applying for a job, likelihood is you're not going to be able to get the relationship to the level of strength that it's going to help you in that particular recruiting process. So what I would encourage you to do is identify the potential opportunities that you might be interested in 3 to 5 years out and start building relationships with those individuals now. As an example, I'm interested one day in becoming a professor for a business school. That I view as 10, 15, maybe 20 years out. Today, I reach out to professors in business school. I reach out to doctoral students pretty regularly, almost monthly. And so I have those relationships in place and they will be in place when I decide to make that transition 10, 15, 20 years from now. So that's not to say you need a crystal ball in terms of knowing everything that you want to do, but when you find an opportunity or an industry or a sector or a job that you think might be interesting to you, start to backtrack into what are the relationships that will actually help me get there. And on that point, the other thing that people ask often is around, what do I see as the difference between relationship building and networking? In my mind, I like to think of the acronym LAST, LAST, locale, approach, setting, target, just to compare the two. Relationship building, I don't think if it is best done in a small setting, ideally one-on-one. So when I go to a conference, in my mind, I'm not thinking, okay, I'm going to build really strong relationships at this conference. Even if you see a friend at a conference that you might not have seen in a year, chances are you probably aren't going to be able to have a super high quality conversation with that individual because tons of people there. And so it makes it really difficult to actually develop the relationship there. In terms of approach, I think that when it comes to relationship building, it very much is about the thoughtfulness of the contact. So if I'm thinking about I've met a person and I have the choice between having, two high quality interactions with them in a year or just pinging them a bunch of random articles and text messages, 12 times a year, the first category is much more impactful. So when it comes to relationship building, I think that the thoughtful contact is what matters the most. In terms of the setting, I think that in person where possible is beneficial. Obviously, given distance and location, sometimes that's not feasible. So Zoom, phone, and so forth. Versus networking, I view that as, whether that is what you post on LinkedIn, sending people messages when they change jobs on LinkedIn. Networking is more of the visible, higher touch type of thing. And then the target in my mind, this is really the way I think about what's the goal that I'm going after. I think when it comes to relationship building, it's really about a symbiotic partnership. So if I think about even the relationship with Carla Harris, I think a big part of what allows me to develop relationships with people is having a mindset that's not so much what am I going to get out of this interaction or with the person, but it's much more what the mission that's driving this person, and is there something connected to that mission that also drives me, and if so, can I help him or her with that mission? So Carla Harris is an example. She's on the board of that organization I had mentioned, Sponsors for Educational Opportunity. I know it's something that she holds near and dear to her heart. Given her busy schedule, she's not able to maybe have a one-on-one conversation with every single intern that comes through. I do have the flexibility to have a one-on-one conversation with every intern that comes through. So I almost take it on as like my mission and stepped up to be the firm captain for Morgan Stanley and really a point person and guide these interns to make sure that they were successful. And that's something that Carla, appreciates. And when she thinks about who she invests in people, oftentimes in the speeches that she gives, she'll talk about, she likes to invest in people that will ultimately invest in other people because people who have that paying it forward mentality in their DNA. So that's the type of thing that I think to myself, what is Carla trying to have in terms of the impact in the world? And is there a way that I, with my time, can help her have that impact? So that's what I mean by symbiotic partnership. And I think the more that you have that mindset towards the relationships you're looking to build, the stronger. Versus networking, in my mind, is just about name recognition, and it more or less stops there. So networking, if you're effectively networking, and person A says to person B, "Do you know Triston?" and person B says, "Yes, I know Triston." Okay, and generally, positive thoughts are associated with that, although they may not know me personally and they may never have even had a conversation with me. That is, in my mind, name recognition, which I just wanted to map this out because a lot of people will ask me how I see relationship building, how I see networking. And I wanted to be able to draw a distinction between how I see the two. It's not to say one is good and one is bad. In fact, I think both are important. And I think both are leveraged at different times and at different ways. And I'm sure we'll dive into that more in the conversation today.